This is Eddie Hope with Virginia Professional Wildlife Removal Services in Kent Store, Virginia, and you are listening to the world's #1 pest control training podcast, the Pest Geek Podcast with Frank Hernandez.
Why 80% of Americans are poisoning themselves. All on this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast.
Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek Podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek Podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. I am your host, Frank Hernandez, here every day, discussing all things pest. And now we're going to be discussing why 80% of Americans are poisoning themselves and everyone is blaming pesticides. I read a study that I'm going to go through that is going to reveal what is really happening in America. What is really happening with pesticides? What is really happening with pest control? And the label is the law. It just doesn't apply to 80% of Americans. That's the harsh and sad reality, because it's harsh, because it's the truth. It's sad because people are poisoning themselves. They are poisoning their kids. They're poisoning their dogs. And everyone is blaming pesticides. Before I get into that, we got a new Harry Says today. And now it's time for Harry Says. Harry says the 6 L's for success. Live with purpose, laugh often, love always, loyalty in all things, listen, and let God do his work in you. Amen, brother. This has been another edition of Harry Says. And if you're listening to us, check us out on Facebook. Check us out on, we're on Facebook group. By the way, I want to thank Pete Chopin for featuring Pest Geek Podcast Listeners Group as one of the Facebook groups on PMP Magazine. So really thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that info. We hope that everybody will make use of that. And you can reach us at, pestgeekpodcast.com. Also, check out the YouTube channel. We're going to be putting some stuff on there. We're getting videos and putting them up. By the way, hey, look, if you've got a video of something you're doing that you think will benefit the Pest Geek Society, benefit the industry, go ahead and send it to me. Go ahead and contact me and send me that video. I'd be glad to put it on our network. And also, if you're doing a presentation, you're doing a lecture, you're doing a speech, and you think that speech should be heard by everyone because nobody will publish it for you, because nobody cares enough to publish it for you, go ahead and send it to us. I'll go ahead and make it as part of our podcast. We're about providing the #1 pest control training in the world. And unfortunately, some of the medias are closed off to a lot of people. And we're making it available to anyone who has anything of value to share. It doesn't matter if you're in the UK. It doesn't matter if you're in Canada. It doesn't matter if you're in the US or if you're in, some other part of the world. We want to be able to put out good quality content for our listeners and have information on our site to share. So, hey, look, feel free to send it to me. We will publish it. If you've got an article that you want to publish, if you've got a good paper that you want people to read, we'll publish it and we'll put it out there and let the marketplace decide what is useful information and what's not. And that's just been my philosophy about doing things. We've got other people going on. Don't forget to listen to Nick Madero's show on Wednesdays. He's interviewing people from all over the country who are pest control operators, who pest control owners, and they're sharing their stories with us. And I think that is a valuable show. We've got working on the bringing in a garden show and putting that on, and we've been contacted, and that, hey, if you've got something of value, you thinking about starting a podcast, and you don't want to go through spending 8 to 10 hours a week on production, distribution, editing, and all that, because that is the real work, go ahead and contact me. I'll be glad to give you a segment if you've got something to share. We're looking for right now termite specialists, people that have a wildlife, somebody that has a specialty. Those are not my specialties, so I'm not going to comment on those things because I have no experience. I mean, that would be being a poser. And I have never believed in that. But I only talk about the things that I know about or things that will be useful to you. So, hey, join in on the conversation. We're making this the place where the small business owner, the small business person, the technician, the individual technician working for a company who nobody cares to train, that we care to train them. Even if it is our competition, even if they do work for a large company. The reality is this is a people business, and when people fail, their families suffer. When people fail, the customer suffers. So, let's work on doing the things that other people don't want to do. And I'm going to tell you that from the heart because I've been in business. It seems to be, an isolationist mentality. This is why there's no national association for independence. Because the things that make us strong are the same things that will divide us. That individuality that makes you strong is the same thing that makes you an isolationist and makes everyone your enemy and puts you somewhere where you can't be reached or touched. And I think that this is why the large organizations with the large companies control everything. The media, the presence, everything, because they've got the money and they've got the power. And the little individual guy is saying, we don't have a voice and we don't have, and we don't have an association and we don't have this and we don't have that. Why? Because you won't come together. That's the real reason. It says unity is power, and there is power in being united. The problem is that's the problem. We can't seem to get under one umbrella. We can't seem to get under one roof. We can't seem to get one thing and focus on it and work towards it to achieve it. Everybody is doing their own individual thing, trying to make their own individual thing happen, and then they want collaboration, but we need to come together. And so we're coming together. We're coming together in ways that I never thought of. We're coming together in ways, we don't have to agree on everything. We just have to agree on some fundamentals. And I think if we can agree on fundamentals and be principle-based versus tactical, or if I'm doing this and you're doing that and we just can't get together, I think we need to become principle-based. We need to do things that will lift up the industry for us independents and show that we do, because we do better quality work. That there's no question about that. We do better quality work than any big company can. Those are too big ships to turn around. They're not nimble. They're not quick. We can do things. We can adapt. We can do things that anybody else can. The problem is we can't come together. So we're doing that. And we thank you for all the listeners who share, all the listeners who contribute, all the listeners who are just constantly sharing stuff with me and sending me emails and sending me studies and keeping me informed of what is happening so I can be the voice in an industry for the small guy, because somebody's got to be a voice. Not all of us, some people are heads, some people are pocketbooks, some people are hands, some people are feet. This is a body that comes together, and if it works together, it can achieve massive things together. So that wasn't my podcast, by the way, but I guess I should have just left it at that and called it a day. But we're talking about the issue of studies that come out constantly, where they do testing in homes and they do testing in buildings and they do testing in communities, and they find all kinds of pesticides. A study was done in Northern California to 90 families. The purpose of the study is to try to find a correlation between the use of pesticides and behavior. Okay, there's nothing wrong, and I'll defend the industry that does, the universities and the scientists and the people that do studies to prove a point or find a correlation. Okay. Those things are vitally important because this is how we discover things that are going wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. The doing testing in homes to find if there is a correlation is vital. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. And I want to applaud you for that because this is how we make great discoveries. The studies are, and I'm having a lot of experience right now with studies and how these studies are conducted, being part of a study firsthand. I think it's a tremendous learning experience for me. It's a learning growth experience. It really has helped me grow being part of this. But what we find out that all of these studies are usually done is in areas where there's either an extreme amount of poverty or there is a minority, typically. Okay, large concentrations of people, because it's easy to get access to the information. Very few of these studies are done in multi-million-dollar, homes like, in California, and where these are $20 million mansions, and they did a study on $220 million mansions. It's not done there. It's not done in places where people, are vegans and they don't allow pesticides in their home, and it's done in the places where most of this stuff is happening. So you got to understand that about studies. You got to understand where it was done, how it was done, where it was performed, who was the subject of it, what was the purpose. And this is great because it shines a light on the neglect that goes on in America. I am currently working on a study where I'm visiting the poorest. I mean, we're talking about the bottom 1%. That's how poor it is. It's not even the bottom 10%. It's the bottom 1%. It has opened up my eyes to a lot of things that I believed and I know now that are true. So I think this is vitally important. I think it is. So the study is titled The Urinary Pyrethroid and Chlorpyrifos Metabolite Concentration in Northern California Families and the relationship to indoor residential insecticide level, part of the study of use of product and exposure related behavior known as SUPERB. Okay, so right there, the title of this study, my God, it just opened up my eyes and made me open my eyes wide and said, oh my dear Jesus, what is going on here? Well, here's an abstract from that study. Since 2001, U.S. federally mandated phase out of residential use of organophosphates. I stopped using organophosphates. Let's see here. I got into this business in 2006 when I started training. By 2007, I was no longer using organophosphates and I was no longer using carbamates. Because remember that most of my work is done in ornamental landscapes outside. Okay, so I was doing a lot of work and using a lot of organophosphates. Why? Because they were cheap. The company was using a lot of these just because they were cheap. They're 50-year-old products that have been paid for 100 times, 1,000 times over, and you can buy them relatively cheap. So organophosphates and carbamates was the main thing used. And I stopped using all of them. All I was left then at that time was pyrethroids. And when I was left with pyrethroids, then later neonics became more available because they were very, 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 I'm saying to the tune of a gallon of imidacloprid, which was Merit at that time, was over $1,000. Today, you can buy that same ingredient, active ingredient, imidacloprid, for $50 a gallon. So in 10 years, look what the price has dropped on that product by offering a generic. It's drastic. Makes it more available to people to use and abuse. As the products get cheaper, they just get overly used and abused. That's the correlation in our industry. If we can solve a problem with a $3 product, why use a $20 product? So that's what happens. But in this study, it just talk about the use of human exposure to pyrethroids in indoor residential environmental has increased. we report concentration of common pyrethroids, pyrethroid metabolites, and chlorpyrifos in floor wipes, urinary concentrations of pyrethroid metabolites, and 3, 5, and 6 trichloropyrrole. And then they talk about samples collected between 2007 and 2009 from 90 Northern California families. As part of the study, the use of product and exposure-related behavior is superb. Correlation and regression analysis examine association between floor wipes, urine sample concentrations. Here is a new thing. So imagine we enter into an age where somebody's going to create it because it's a huge concern for people, and somebody is going to create a product where you can easily test your urine at home to see if you have pesticides in your urine. It's going to happen. Where you maybe send a little sample to a lab and then they send you all the pesticides that were found in your urine because you're concerned. And then all of a sudden you say, well, I'm going to become a vegetarian. I'm going to eat organics and no more pesticides in my home. I mean, there is a day where that's coming. Understand that it's a market. There's a market for it. There's a market for people that don't want pesticides in their home, who are usually my clients. They're higher educated clients. They're very highly educated. They have masters and PhDs. They're very wealthy. They do yoga. They eat vegetarian, and they want products in their home that fit their lifestyle. We sell a lifestyle brand. This is what we sell. We're a lifestyle brand catering to people who have similar views that we do. And there's a match. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that, and it's going to be the norm. Understand that that's where the industry is going. That's going to be the norm. I saw that 10 years ago, and I'm not that smart. So what they did is they did the testing, and one of what stuck out immediately was this product, chlorpyrifos, which I don't use. And I'm going to explain to you why I don't use it. Now, they did find transpermethrin. So the indoor use of permethrin is high. And 98.7% chlorpyrifos, transpermethrin, and bifenthrin. No kidding, 59%. These were the three in Northern California. Listen to this. Listen to this. Chlorpyrifos, permethrin, bifenthrin, and 3-PBA were the ones found. That sets off a huge red flag for me. And I'm going to explain to you why. First of all, I have no, permethrin, 97, chlorpyrifos 98.7, permethrin 97.5, bifenthrin 59.3, and 3-PBA of 98.7, which is a degradate of these products. So is the transpermethrin. When I look at this and I understand about pesticides more than the average bear, it was done in a Northern California environment. The first product that is in high concentration. This, by looking at this study, I'm thinking Hispanic migrant workers, migrant families. And here's why. And before anybody says, hey, you're a racist, the last name is Hernandez. So hold off on that thought for a minute that I'm stereotyping, but I know enough about this work. I live among 65% of my population is Hispanic. Okay? In Miami, 65% of the population here is Hispanic. I work among and live with people who have worked in agriculture. Many of the illegals here have worked in agriculture. And a lot of them their entire life. And then they started up landscaping companies. And they decided they were going to go into pest control. I deal with this on a daily basis. And the products that they're using are the products they learned to use while they were in agriculture. That's right. They're applying AG products, labeled for AG, with restricted use pesticides, most of the time, on residential landscapes. See the problem? When I look at a product and it says 98% of this product, well, here's why this is a product. This is a problem. that the study doesn't point out, and the study doesn't touch on, and the study doesn't get into because they don't want to be political. But me, your host, is fearless, and I will deal with this. This chlorpyrifos is the same product that we find. It's first of all, it's a restricted use product. Okay? It's a restricted use product used in agriculture. It means it's a federally, and what restricted use product for those people, there's always a confusion about what a restricted use product is. What a restricted use product is a product that has been classified by the EPA with an RUP restriction and requires a special license, usually, to apply. In Florida, you need an RUP license in order to apply a restricted use pesticide. So not only is it not good enough that you're already a certified operator, a certified technician, that you're a company certified, that you're licensed, in order to apply it, you need a special designation. That right there makes it doubly troubling. Doubly troubling. Hey, I like that. It says it's on the label, right on the top. If you get a restricted use product, this is going to be top center. Restricted use pesticide for retail sale and use only by certified applicators or persons under their direct supervision, and only for those uses covered by the certified operator's certification. This product is restricted to commercial fields, agriculture, restricted to golf courses, and they have a restriction on how it can be applied, where it can be applied, and how much can be applied on an annual basis. But the restriction is, this is not approved. Here's the clincher. Not approved for indoor use. It's illegal. If I, as a pest control operator, would apply this product indoor, and it got reported, and somebody got sick, and I was doing an apartment building, and 90 families were getting sick, I would be arrested, brought up on federal charges, and be put away in a maximum security prison along with rapists and murderers for the rest of my life. This is how serious the problem is. And yet, they found this in the concentrations that they found it in 90 homes. They made it a center of the topic. The question is, how did an illegal product that has a restricted use for agriculture get into all those homes? Nobody's asking that question. Nobody brought that up. Nobody said, I think we need to get the EPA involved in here. And here's why they won't do it. Because if they do that, then all of a sudden their study there's a problem there. And their study, then nobody opens the door to them, and nobody will allow them to do the study anymore. And people will be indignant with them. So now you just report on it. Where are the 90 families? How did that product get into that home? And then I look at permethrin being the second, which is when I ask a landscaper what they're applying to a landscape, permethrin. Permethrin. Why? Where do they learn it? They learn it in ag. They learn it in working in nurseries. People using organophosphates that are restricted use for, like, Saigon. I still see people using it. I walk through a neighborhood and I smell Saigon, and I said, somebody just applied Saigon here. Landscapers applying it. Malathion. Very cheap products that you can buy very cheaply. And then it's no sense that bifenthrin was found in 59%. It's the most used pesticide. is 50%, I think, of the pyrethroid sold is bifenthrin. See, these people either work in agriculture, and what they're doing is, how did they get their hands on a restricted use product that can't be sold in California, which has one of the toughest laws in the country on pesticides? They work in the fields, they take a little bit home, and they apply it to their house, and they poison their families. Because they don't understand, they've never really been trained on pesticide use. Let's forget for a minute that 80% of Americans are poisoning themselves and everyone is blaming the pesticide. And let's put aside for a minute that there is the licensing part that is so expensive, and getting registered and getting trained for 20 years to comply with all the laws, and the insurance and the marketing and the 57 things that we have on our P&L. Let's just focus on one thing alone: zero training. Here is the hypocrisy of this. If I do, in some states, I apply a pesticide, and the label says you need to apply 1/4 ounce per gallon, but check this out, or 1/2 ounce per gallon, but the state requires that you report that use in percentage of active ingredient. In other words, a 6% solution of bifenthrin was used. And you fail to put that on your report and you get an inspection, you get a fine. For that, what most people would be considered insignificant and borderline stupid. You will get fined if they discover that you said, oh, I put 1/2 ounce. And it was, oh, by the way, it wasn't 1/2 ounce, it was 12 milliliters. Because 1/2 ounce is 15. You went 3 milliliters over. You would get fined. Yet 80% of Americans can buy an over-the-counter product, double, triple the dosage because they know it's cut. And nobody's going to verify, even though the label says that the application of this product, the use of this product, inconsistent with this labeling, is a violation of federal law. Yet 80% of Americans are violating federal law. And nobody can enforce it. Yet we'll take a hammer to the head for a seemingly insignificant infraction because we have the license, we're the profession, and you can monitor us. Do you see the hypocrisy? And yet, the percentage of pest control people that have actually applied a pesticide incorrectly to the percentage of people that are actually applying pesticide, it's like 99% to 1. See the problem? No training. Let's look at the product for a minute. Here, and I'm going to tell you a story, 2 stories that just came up. I got hired by a daughter of obviously 2 parents to do the pest control in their home because we were eco-friendly. And I explained the process and how we don't. So I get hired by this customer to solve several problems that her parents were having. Number one is they were having large roaches, American roaches, and they had 3 different types of ant problems. They had ghost ant problems everywhere. They had white-footed ant problems. They had crazy ant problems. This is a large property, lots of trees around it, lots of shrubs. And I got hired by her. And she wanted me to solve this for her parents. So I start talking to her about what needs to be done. And I say, look, we're going to solve this problem temporarily. There's a lot of issues with the house. It has a crawl space. You've got a septic tank. There's ants all over this property. It's a large property. We're going to have to be here on a regular basis to keep this under control, or within 3 to 4 months, you're going to be back to where you are now. She tells me, well, I don't think my parents are going to go for that. I'm paying you, just get this solved And I said, but why wouldn't they go for that? I mean, they've got this huge problem. He says, well, we had another they have a pest control guy coming in and this is about how can they have a pest control guy and have all these problems? And then she tells me the story and says, it gets worse. The reason I hired you is because they were getting poisoned by this guy. He was using 7 indoors, carbaryl, to spray the indoor of her house. But he was very cheap, like $25 a month. They started to get sick after years of this. Asked the guy what he was using, 7. Still had all the problems. Paying $25 a month to get somebody to spray their house. And I said, but Jesus, we're at $65 every 2 months to do this. The difference would be $15 every 2 months. And we can actually keep it under control, and we're not going to put any product in there sprayed that doesn't need to be there. She talked to her parents. Parents said, no, I was too expensive. Solved the problem and left it at that. I told her, I said, listen, you really need to contact the Department of Agriculture and turn this guy in because what he's doing is highly illegal. Here's the clincher. You ready for the cliffhanger? She's an ex-cop, retired. She wouldn't do it. Parents are retired ex-Air Force. For $15, they allowed themselves to get poisoned and refused to change. They live in a very wealthy part of town. That property with a 1,700 square foot house is probably land value and house value. It's probably close to $1 million. This is the problem in America. That people think that what we do as pest control people is spray. And nobody wants to pay us to spray. So they will pay a guy that does it illegally because he's cheap. It's no different. And what's going on, where they find most of the pesticides, apartment buildings. Where is the cheapest work done in our industry? Apartment buildings. I'm doing that work in the inner city. I went into one of the apartments. I see this dust everywhere. I'm like, oh my gosh. You know, they got boric acid and just put boric acid everywhere to deal with the problem. So I'm doing my service and I said, you know, you really need to pick this up, vacuum it, because here's the problem. The reason we're there is because every single child in that home has asthma. They got dust everywhere. Going in the laundry room and I see a bottle of Orthane, fire ant killer. Take the bottle and I ask, what have you done with this? Because this is an apartment building and you have no fire ants. Oh, that's what I spread all over the house, the dust. Because they told me that that would control German roaches. Two examples of what is wrong with America and pest control. She could easily buy a 50% acephate product on the market, put it in an entire part of her home, dust it everywhere, wherever you're breathing it up in clumps. It's no different than using PCO, but you're applying it at what, a 6% solution? Smells like cabbage, dead rotten cabbage when you apply it, or it's used as PCO pellets or Orthane packs for the bottle for if you're doing lawn and ornamental. It's a systemic insecticide, organophosphate. This is the problem. The ability for somebody just to apply something to solve the pain, to solve the problem without being able to pay for it. One can afford it. and refuses to pay for it. The other one can't afford. I mean, that bottle costs as much as a gallon of milk or more, like 3 gallons of milk for that person. That's what it meant. They were so desperate to solve this problem. It was so bad that they poisoned their family to solve it because they couldn't afford it. Those are the two dramatics. Those are the two ends of the spectrum. Yet we live in in the most affluent country in the world, where we have the internet and we can get the facts about everything. And we still live in ignorance. Tell me that we're smarter as a society. As a society as a whole. Yet, it's not the people. It's the pesticide. People apply pesticides. People apply pesticides incorrectly. People do things that are wrong. All these products can be used in the right way and be applied safely according to what the EPA says. Yet, 80% of people that are doing it themselves are doing it wrong. They're doing it wrong thinking that because an over-the-counter product is over-the-counter, it's really inert. When the reality is that most of the over-the-counter products are 50 years old, incredibly cheap to make, readily available sources, and available to anyone. Yet we're using modern products that are probably less than 10 years old, that are safer according to the EPA than those prior products were, because they're getting phased out. And yet, these products are making it into the home. Going back to the original study, how did this product get in there? Somebody illegally put it there. Somebody who is not trained to do it right. And here's what I'm proposing to my audience. There's nobody in the industry talking about being vocal about the things that I talk about on this podcast. There isn't a major publication. There isn't an association dealing with it in the mainstream scale where it needs to be. If you want to make an impact in the world, and you want to make an impact in your business and in the industry, you got to take it to where the problem is, the mainstream. We got to take our cause to the mainstream. We got to educate clients on a mass scale, front and center, like a cigarette ad did, or when they're trying to combat cigarettes and they put these massive ads out. We have to educate the general public on what real pest control is, not fake pest control. I think I'm going to come up with a hashtag, say no to fake pest control. Hashtag no fake pest control. Because guess what? If you're going to say, listen, here's the ideology. They should make those pesticides illegal and people should not be allowed to use them. You get into a nanny state. Basically, what you're telling people is they're so stupid that they need to be regulated on everything they do. And this is anti-capitalist. This is anti, if you're a right-winger, this is anti to what you believe. The manufacturers aren't gonna sit there and say, yeah, let's not allow our products to be sold. Let's cut our sales by 80%. Because guess what? If the industry is $6 billion, it's a $6 billion industry, and the average cost of good in pest control is 3%, that's what? $200 million that the industry is worth? Cut that by 80%, see what happens to you. Nobody's going to stand for that. The national associations aren't going to come out and say, yep, we're going to lobby and we're going to legislate that they remove all pesticides from the do-it-yourself market. They are not going to cut their own throat. So what we have to do is we simply have to go around that and educate the end user. And this is what I'm proposing to my audience. That we take our message to the mainstream. We live in an info society. And here's what's happening. While you're sitting there being a protection saying, we don't want to give away all our secrets. We don't want to tell everybody everything. Everybody is writing bogus articles, being marketers, and selling bogus information. And we're sitting on the information and we won't do anything with it. The universities are sitting on the information and nobody's reading it. The pest control conferences are all closed up and nobody's hearing anything. This is what I'm proposing. So you take 30, 40,000 businesses across the country that are doing it right, and let's promote the heck out of those guys. And let's educate clients on what real pest control is. Let's agree on some fundamentals. Let's agree on the basics. Let's agree that, spray and pray isn't really pest control. You don't fight a machine that you're not going to win with. Educate the public. Educate the mainstream. Show people what real pest control is and why they're failing and why they're going to fail every single time. They don't have the 10, 20, 15, 25 years of training in every single pest that we encounter with all the chemical understanding and all the biology. They think they do, but they don't. Let's take this to the mainstream. Let's do for ourselves what really nobody else is going to do for us. Let's band together, have a message, and take that message to the mainstream. Let's get rid of all the false assumptions. Let's use the power of content marketing to market real content. And let's get credit for it. This is what I'm proposing. I know that none of the other podcasts that are in this industry are going to want to do this. But I'm doing this. And there are people out there who have a like-mind vision and want to join together and make it happen. No membership fees, no membership clubs, grassroots effort. We have the media. We have the medium. Let's do something with it. I want to hear from you. I want to hear from what you think. And you know what? The naysayers are a dime a dozen. But I've learned that those guys won't do anything anyway. They're in the way. Naysayers, they're just in the way. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. That's been my motto forever. You lead, follow, or get out of the way. I'm a leader. There are people who are going to follow and people who are going to want to be in my way. You decide where you want to go with this. I'm Frank Hernandez, the Pest Geek. I will see you again tomorrow. Have a pestacular day.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.